This is going to be a good one, guys. Today we're talking about HOKA's top-of-the-line trail running race day shoe. Guys, this is the HOKA TECTON X3. Let's get into it. Alright, full disclosure, HOKA was good enough to send me this pair of the TECTON X3 for the purpose of review. However, they haven't told me what to say. No one at HOKA has any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. With that said, you're going to be able to pick up your own pair of the HOKA TECTON X3 for $275. And I know, $275 is super expensive. But also remember, this is top of the line. There's a lot of specialty running tech that has gone into it. But even so, I know, $275 is a boatload of money. But anyway, let's get into the shoe. HOKA claims the TECTON X3 has a stack height of 40 in the heel, 35 in the forefoot for the men's version, 39 in the heel, 34 in the forefoot for the women's version, with a 5mm drop for both. Now, HOKA claims that in a US men's size 10, the TECTON X3 will tip the scale at 10 ounces or 283 grams. However, in my size, a US men's size 12.5, it tips the scale at 11.4 ounces or 322 grams. Now, some of you may be thinking, Matt, the TECTON X3 is it's a bit heavy, isn't it? And yes, it is heavier than the TECTON X2 from last year, and in my size, the TECTON X2 tipped the scale at 10.5 ounces or 299 grams, so 23 grams less than the TECTON X3. But guys, let me tell you, the difference, the step up between the TECTON X2 and the TECTON X3 are well worth that 23 gram increase. But I mean, weight is a concern because we've also got the Speedgoat 6, which in my size tipped the scale at 11.3 ounces or 319 grams. So even the Speedgoat 6 is 3 grams less than the TECTON X3. Okay. Start with the most apparent upgrade or addition. Maybe it's not an upgrade to you, but I think it is an upgrade. And that's this gator style heel collar to help keep out dirt and debris. Now look, I get it. There's probably a lot of trails that you run on where you don't worry about dirt and debris getting in your shoe. But even in my testing here in Florida, where we don't have the most extreme trails, I found it incredibly useful. And of course, I've run races where I have actually attached separate gaiters to my shoes. So to have this built in, it seems like a nice addition. Of course, what would be nicer is if HOKA offered two options, like one with the gator and one without, but I don't really see that happening because it would require a complete redesign, and we'll get to why in just a second. Now for the upper, HOKA is using their Matrix textile quick dry upper, and I think this is maybe one of the best things about the shoe. Well, there's a lot of good things about the shoe, but one of the best things about the shoe is the Matrix quick dry upper, and that's because it is just so porous. In fact, when I hold it up and I look through, I can see the light just shining through and coming out this side. Of course, you can't see that, but it's really porous. And although in my testings I didn't do any river crossings, stream crossings, I was running in some pretty wet scenarios and I was splashing through a lot of muddy puddles and my feet stayed comfortable. So what I mean is if you were running and you were splashing through river crossings, the TECTON X3 is going to expel all that water that comes in. Oh, HOKA has also incorporated some hydrophobic fibers into their upper, so the TECTON X3 is not like an open sieve, like the water isn't just flowing in. So it should shed some water off and then it should be very easy to expel all that extra water. Does that make sense? Oh, this upper also has a lot of underlays, giving it just a little extra support. And I'm going to hold this up. I'm probably going to have to overlay something to really show you. But on this dark mesh part here, you can see the overlays coming up, and that's just going to provide a little support to the upper. So especially when you lock down those laces, it's going to give you a good midfoot and whole foot lockdown. HOKA has included a dynamic vamp, and that's going to encourage foot splay. And basically that vamp just allows for a little stretch. And I know a lot of people complain about HOKA's being quite narrow. That wasn't my experience with the TECTON X3. My feet did have plenty of room here in the toe box. Okay, now I want to show you this heel collar because it's very difficult for you to see, so I'm going to have to explain it. But if I peel back the gaiter just to look on the inside, the heel counter is actually very race inspired. And by that, I mean there's nothing there. In fact, let me show you the Mark X2. And if I hold this up, you can see how we've just got two little bolsters on each side. Well, the TECTON X3 is very similar to that, only the bolsters on the X3 are a lot more padded. They're a lot thicker. And because these bolsters are just a little more padded, they're giving me a little better grip on my heel. And because of that, when compared to the Mark X2, I didn't have as much heel slip. Now, the potential for heel slip is still here in the TECTON X3, because if we talk about the heel counter, you can see this. This is what I mean by race inspired, at least race inspired for a lot of race shoes where they just totally do without the heel counter. That is a direction that HOKA has gone with the TECTON X3. There is nothing there. I mean, it's very flexible. And those bolsters don't come all the way around the back. So they're on each side. In fact, when I hold it up, you can actually see it right there. And then there is no padding in the back. But what I found, because normally I would think that I would get a lot of heel slip in a shoe like the TECTON X3 with no heel counter at all. But what I found is that this extended gaiter kind of grips to my leg or right above my ankle just a little bit, and it stops the shoe from slipping. At least that was my experience. I think if you do experience heel slip on a regular basis, especially in shoes without a heel counter, it's highly possible that that's going to happen on the Tecton X3. Now, as far as overlays go, yeah, there are quite a lot. We've got the HOKA branding. I mean, I say there are quite a lot. But remember, this is a trail shoe, so we need a little more protection. So yeah, the HOKA branding, got the HOKA bird on the medial side, some overlay taping just coming around what would normally be the heel counter area. And then we do have an overlay coming around the toe box just to give a little protection, obviously from rocks, you know, when we're out there running up and down mountains and such. We want to have just a little protection. Now, it's still quite soft. It's not giving you that much protection. Probably best to jump over those rocks rather than kick them, but we do have that protection on the toe box. There are overlays surrounding the eyelet chain just to give a little extra support, and HOKA has included ghillie lacing, so we've got those little loops that protrude from the upper and then the laces go through those. Now the tongue, or what would be the tongue, is like a very breathable kind of knit material. And if I stick this up, I mean, let me see if you can see that. You can see just how pliable that is. It's like a very breathable knit running right where the tongue would be. And that breathable knit just kind of merges right into this upper, and I was able to get a good lockdown. Now, there is barely any pad. I mean, there's no padding in the tongue area where the laces come across the top of your midfoot. I mean, no padding at all. It's just a thin piece of knit material. But still, I didn't have any lace bite in the Tecton X3. I think it's actually a pretty good design. Now, we can see we do have a pull right here, but for next year on the Tecton X4, they're going to continue with this extended gaiter. I think we need a heel pull on the back, or maybe even a heel pull down here, because like a lot of race shoes, the Tecton X3 is fairly difficult to get on and off. And this is mainly due to the back, the heel counter, being non-existent. It's so floppy that when you're trying to stretch this gaiter open to get your foot in, kind of put your heel down, and it just kind of collapses the back. Look, really, it's not a big deal. Yes, it took me a little longer than a normal shoe to put the Tecton X3 on and again take off, but when it comes down to it, you know, it was probably a couple extra seconds. Really, no big deal. Okay, let's come down to the midsole. And this is where HOKA has made some giant strides in their trail race shoe technology, because the Tecton X3 is featuring a dual layer PIBA midsole. Now, remember last year on the Tecton X2, we also had a dual density midsole, but we had that supercritical EVA on the top and regular EVA on the bottom. With the Tecton X3, we've got dual layer PIBA. Now, the top layer of PIBA is a slightly softer formulation. That's going to create for a nice soft step-in feel. It's going to really add to the comfort. And then we have a slightly firmer formulation on the bottom, and that's going to give you the agility and the proprioception that you want when you're running on trails, right? We need to be able to feel the ground when we're trail running. It's a lot of uneven terrain out there, and we don't want like a pillowy soft ride at all times. Even though, I've got to say, the Tecton X3 is a pretty soft and smooth ride. Now, sandwiched in between these two layers of PIBA foam are HOKA's parallel carbon fiber plates. So there are two plates next to each other like that, and that is just going to give you a little more control when you're running on uneven ground. Now, HOKA had those parallel carbon fiber plates last year in the Tecton X2, but this year they've included their winglets on the side, and we've seen the winglets in a lot of HOKA's plated shoes, and that's actually what this is here on the lateral side. If we turn it around, we have another little winglet here on the medial side, and the winglets just add a little more control. Now, if we come down to the outsole, HOKA is using a Vibram Mega Grip light base outsole, and we've got 4mm traction lugs. Now, these traction lugs are absolutely amazing, and I've got to say, even when I'm touching it, oh, by the way, I did wash these shoes very well before I brought them back into the studio. I mean, these have been filthy every time I've taken them out, but this rubber compound on the Vibram Mega Grip light base just feels really sticky to the touch. When I was running in it, when I was going up and downhill, it just grips to the dirt and rocks like a champ. Now, we do have these special shaped hoof lugs, just like we saw in the Speed Go. They're kind of shaped like this, so when you're climbing, you're able to grip onto the dirt just a little more. And then on the outside of each of the lugs, we've got little teeth, and these are just going to help provide even better grip. And my friends, it works. The grip of the Tecton X3 is absolutely outstanding. Now, I don't know how well you can see right now. Maybe I'll overlay something, but the lugs on the heel section of the rubber and the lugs on the forefoot are pointing in different directions. So when you are going uphill, you're probably going to be more on your forefoot. So when you pull back, those lugs are going to grip into the ground. And then on the heel, the lugs are reversed. So if you're kind of landing on your heels going downhill, the lugs are going to provide even more grip. And as I said, it works. Okay, so let's talk about the ride. And the ride is actually, it's pretty exciting, because for me at least, I think this is really the first trail shoe that I've thought was a real super shoe contender for the trails. Now, I know that I started this video by talking about the weight and how the X3 is just a little heavier, but it didn't feel like that underfoot. The shoe felt light, the shoe felt responsive, and I'm loving that PIBA foam. In fact, when I was running in this shoe on the road, so sometimes I have to run on the roads just a little bit to get to the trails, the shoe feels just as snappy as some of my other PIBA midsole plated race shoes. It's really fun to run in. So with that in mind, you know that this shoe is going to excel when you are running on trails where you have a chance to kind of open up your stride and pick up the pace a little bit. Now, when I was doing climbs or descents in the Tecton X3, I thought the shoe also performed very well. But for me at least, the only problem that I found when running in the Tecton X3 is when I was running on kind of uneven ground. And when I say uneven ground, in this instance, I'm talking about where there were gullies from rain. So the rain had kind of washed down the trails and washed out like a gully in the trail. And if I didn't watch my footing, it felt like my ankle was going to roll slightly if I kind of went down into the gully. Now, to be totally fair, these gullies were pretty thick. And if I was running in any shoe, I would probably experience the same thing. But because I was hyper aware of the Tecton X3 on my foot, I was kind of thinking, maybe the shoe doesn't give me as much support as a traditional running shoe, or I should say with a traditional upper. Because on a shoe with a traditional upper, and let's just go back to the Tecton S2, you can see we have a little more support around this heel collar. Now look, it's still pretty flexible on the top, but there is still a little more support here than there is on the Tecton X3. And it did make me think that if I was running in, a super technical mountain race, would I want the Tecton X3 just because of the possibility of like rolling an ankle? And ultimately I came to the conclusion that I would want the Tecton X3 because we're making some sacrifices. We have this super light upper, which I think is light years ahead of any other trail shoe that HOKA has come out with. And again, if I am honest, I think I would be rolling an ankle in any shoe that I ran in if I was running in the same scenario, like running with one foot going down in a gully and another one out. Now, one of my channel viewers also has this pair of shoes, and he said he experienced the same thing with not being totally supported, and he went ahead and taped his ankles and then ran in the Tecton X3, and he found it much better. So take that for what it's worth. So I hope I'm not leaving that too open for questions or criticism. I think there is some room for HOKA to make some improvements on the X4. However, look, you really can't have any structure in the back here because you need it to be soft and pliable to even get your foot in. So I don't know. I think HOKA has come up with a pretty good design for the Tecton X3, and I'm even more excited to see where they take it next year. But I guess ultimately it comes down to, if I have any trail races this year, the Tecton X3 is going to be the shoe that I grab for. For me, the Tecton X3 is one of those shoes that just makes you feel better about a runner when you're running it. I suppose that's not totally abnormal. I think I would feel better driving a Ferrari than my old Kia. So yeah, I think that's a good analogy. The Tecton X3 is like, it's the Ferrari of trail shoes. So now I want to hear from you. Have you run in any of HOKA's Tectons? Are you thinking about picking up a pair of the Tecton X3? And especially for those of you that have run in these, what are your thoughts? Do you agree with anything I've said? Drop a comment and let me know. And with that, it's Matt B. This has been my review of the HOKA Tecton X3. Be kind, be happy, run well. I'll see you in a couple of days.